Hey folks, I'm Mark Ryan. This is Super Review, and this is the no matter how I say this thing sounds kind of awful, so let's just call it the Juicy 41T. So this is an IEM that I actually first heard about the same way a lot of you guys hear about these things, just through somebody in the community talking about it. Shout out to Lixeem for my Discord server. And like a lot of you, I didn't really have much to go on apart from some pretty promising looking frequency response graphs that a couple of people had posted on Squiglink. And I'll be honest, those graphs were actually enough to get my attention to the point that I took a gamble. I spent $160 to get the Juicy 41T shipped out, and a few weeks later, as is normal for AliExpress, it arrived, and I'll be honest, my initial impressions were a little unimpressed, to be perfectly blunt. But a funny thing kind of happened, all right? This thing was sitting in my studio where we're at right now, and I kept kind of reaching for it, right? I just decided initially, I was like, it's okay, I'm not gonna review this thing. But I kept reaching for it and listening to it when I didn't need to be. And that was kind of an interesting sign, because most of the time in my life, I am either listening to things that I'm listening for review, listening to things that I'm comparing to things that I'm listening for review, or I'm listening to my favorite stuff. And the Juicy 41T over the past month has been the single IEM that has spent the most time in my ears. And so I figured, okay, I gotta actually do a review of this thing and figure out what it is that I actually love about the Juicy 41T. So that's what we're gonna talk about today. So like all my other reviews, this is a live stream. If you're here now live, how's it going? If you have questions about the Juicy 41T, any alternative pronunciations you'd like to offer, please leave it in the live chat. And at the end of the review, we will have a bit of a back and forth conversation and hopefully answer all of your burning questions. But I guess no one sent this to me, I bought this, but if you want to check it out, I do have it linked in the description down below. It's on AliExpress, now on Amazon via Hi-Fi Go, as well as on Hi-Fi Go, so it's now more available than it was when I ordered it. But should you get it? Well, let's dive to the table and start talking about this IEM. We'll talk about the build quality, the physical stuff about this IEM, then we'll get into talking about the sound, the signature that attracted me to it, what I like about it, what I don't like about the sound of this thing, and then we will bring in some comparisons just to let you know exactly where I think this thing kind of lands in the realm of, $160 IEMs, but maybe more to the point, where does this thing land in like the realm of IEMs that are like kind of my favorites, right? These neutral tuned monitors. So let's go. All right, here's the box. It is pretty nondescript, and what's kind of interesting about it is there is not a lick of English on it, which is maybe indicative of the fact that they were not necessarily intending to sell this IEM to me, and yet nonetheless I bought it. So cool looking box otherwise, and what you get with it is a pretty modest accessories package, but some actually pretty decent stuff. We'll start over here with the tips. You get two different styles of ear tips. You get silicone and you get foam. The foams come in two different sizes, which is nice. A lot of the times foams only come in large, and then the silicone tips come in your typical three sizes, small, medium, and large. And you might notice I'm not using any of these silicone tips. These are fine tips. These are just like purely purely average tips. They're fine. Well, I guess we can talk about which tips I'm using. Apart from that though, they also do include this actually pretty nice little carry case. It is, I think, the right size. This thing is just large enough or just small enough to be pocketable. It's got a zip, semi-hard case, and it kind of looks like a tanned leather or something on the outside, I promise. Okay, I just gave it the sniff test. That's definitely not a real leather, but it is nonetheless, I think, an above average quality case, which is nice. They did also include, and this is kind of handy, microfiber towel. You can never have too many of these, but apart from that, well, you just get the IEM itself. And let's talk about now build quality, and we'll start with this cable. As I lay this thing out, the first thing that stood out to me is, okay, it's actually a little bit on the thick side, which is kind of impressive in terms of just like feeling like you got your money's worth, but having a thick cable is not always actually a good thing. But the behavior on this cable is actually really quite nice. It is nice, soft and supple cable. I like the color, and yeah, I don't know, just overall a really, really well behaved cable. Interestingly, I found out that they were selling this cable separately on AliExpress for like 25 bucks, and I like it enough that I bought a couple of them. So yeah, it's just a decent all-around cable. As you can see, it is on the thick side. Well, maybe you can't totally tell, but here, just like that's how tall it roadie wraps, right? It's a little bit on the thick side, but for me, just overall, it has been a very comfortable cable. Of course, you've got your preformed ear hooks. You've got, relatively small hardware. You've got a chin slider that mostly stays in place. It's pretty good about that. And then, of course, you've got your standard 2-pin connectors. If you wanted to swap out this cable, you could. But apart from that, okay, it's got a straight jack. I think you can order this in 3.5 mil, 2.5, or 4.4 options. I, of course, opted for 3.5, the one true connector. Okay, let's now talk about the earpieces now. And I'll flip over this one just to show you that they are actually a little bit asymmetrical. The shell design is, I would say, kind of like a semi-custom fitted resin shell. To me, it is reminiscent of the shell shape that you get with the Audio Legacy 2, Legacy 4, as well as like the Kiwi ears stuff. So generally, I really like it, but let's start with talking about the aesthetic on this thing, which is, kind of unique. It's got like this little, people have alluded to or called this kind of like a surfboard look or something like that. And I can see where they're coming from. It's actually like a strip of paint that's going through here, this golden yellow strip right here. But then apart from that, it's a nice clear shell with a fairly modest silver print on the outside that is unique for the left and the right sides. It is clear, of course, so you can see the insides if you'd like. There is your dynamic driver, and I guess I didn't talk about the driver config in the intro, but the name is a tell, the 41T. So it's got one for the dynamic driver, and then it's got 4 balanced armatures that you can see kind of all crammed in over here. And I don't know, personally, I really like being able to see into the drivers. I dig it a lot. But as much as I like the aesthetic on this thing, I think the fit is even better. So the shells on these I would describe as medium size. And again, it's kind of like a semi-custom shape. You can see that it's a little bit opinionated here. Let's see if I can kind of highlight. It's got, this little wing down here that catches the anti-tragus. But for my ear, it's honestly just about perfect. Let me plug it into this side and punch in so you can see how well it fits. So the ingress egress is super easy. All right, boom, I'm fitted. Comfort is very, very strong for me, as well as fit security is fantastic. The nozzles I would say are, let's see if I can pull this over into view in some sort of useful way. There we go. I would say the nozzles are not especially long. It's not especially short either. So I would say it's kind of like a medium length nozzle. And it is actually, I guess I can show this on the close up. It is actually it's got a notch on it, so it'll hold onto the ear tip fairly strong. But it's actually a metal nozzle. Width-wise, I would say that this is, I don't think anyone should have any concerns about the width of this nozzle. But I did want to just talk about the length of it, which means that because it's not especially long and not especially short, I would say because it's not long, it doesn't, cause me any sort of discomfort or anything in the ear over a long period of time. And because it's got kind of that custom fitted design, and again, it's catching like this little bit, this little nubbin right here in the ear. The scientific term is the nubbin. It's just, the fit security is fantastic. So really, really quite dig the form factor on this IEM all around. Pretty impressive for an IEM that costs, I know $160 isn't exactly cheap, but I don't know, to get an IEM that I like the build quality of this as much, maybe the next best thing would be like the Kiwi Ears Orchestra Lite, and that's like $250, and that's already kind of a good deal in and of itself. So I don't know, pretty impressed here. But yeah, I don't know. I think that's about as much as I can say about the physical stuff. So we might as well dive in and start talking about the sound quality here on the Juicy 41T. And like I typically do, we will start with the sound signature. And like I mentioned, the graph of this IEM is what got my attention, okay? And the graph tells you, frankly, almost everything when it comes to sound signature, if you know how to read the graph. And what I saw in the graphs was kind of like a Hexa, like a Truthier Hexa-like neutral. Just got a well-tuned upper mid-range, modest in the treble, and a linear bass rise from around 1,000 hertz down to 20 hertz. And why I tend to like that sound signature is, one, it's just kind of my version of neutral. Like that's my bag. It's a little bit on the low contrast side, a slight warm tilt to it. And generally it's a sound that privileges mid-range nuance over like big contrast between the bass and the treble. And for me, that's what I dig. But what was interesting is that in listening experience, the 41T, it doesn't quite match up exactly to my expectations with that those frequency response graphs that I was seeing. I would say that this is, yes, definitely a warm neutral, but it's even more laid back than I expected. The treble on this is more relaxed than I was guessing from the graphs that I was seeing, and in combination with the rest of the somewhat warm tune, just kind of dials down the contrast even more versus something like the Hexa. This is definitely not going to be a bassy set. If you're looking for a bassy set, this is not it, but it does have a good bass presence. It extends very, very well into the sub bass, and we'll talk a little bit more about the bass quality in a bit. And the mid bass is not overly lean in the way that it is on some other monitors, like even like the Blessing 3 or something like that. I think that this has a good amount of, even calling it, it's definitely not meaty in the mid bass, but it's got enough muscle on the mid bass to not sound overly lean. So that's just the general sound signature. What do I like about the sound? Actually, you know what? Let's do this a little bit reverse. Let's talk about, first of all, what I don't like about the sound of this, because that was my first impression. My first impression on this IEM was, it was a little meh, and it came around. So let's start with the stuff that I didn't like about it, all right? Honestly, just initial impressions is it's not a very technical set, okay? I mentioned it's got pretty relaxed treble, and that results in a lack of incisiveness, okay? When we're talking about sort of the leading edge of instruments, right? A guitar pluck, a drum strike, stuff like that. You're talking about that leading edge and being really well defined, and I describe that as incisiveness. And because the treble in this is, again, pretty relaxed, I found it to be just not especially incisive. Transients lack a certain bite on the Juicy 41T. And also because of that, I think the separation between instruments is, it's mediocre. It's not awful, but it doesn't stand out in a way that I typically like to see. The stereo width I would also describe as just so-so. Again, these are like the sorts of things that usually are what make me want to keep coming back to an IEM, and the 41T, frankly, it's a little bit lackluster in that regard. It's not bad per se, it's a little lackluster. So all that said, why do I like this thing? Well, let's talk about what I do like about this thing, what I love about the 41T, because frankly, there is a lot. Let's start with that tonality, that tonal balance I was describing. While it's maybe a little bit warmer than I was expecting, honestly, it's pretty awesome. It's mid-rangey, it's got that low contrast sound, a little bit warm, a little bit laid back, but it still gives me a nice clear representation of vocals, which is what I like. Kind of the description that comes to mind for me is that this is neutral with somewhat of a warm, gooey center. I don't know, there's just something just like welcoming and soft and relaxing to this listen. And combined with the soft technical performance, it honestly just overall makes this just kind of an easy, disengaged listen that's actually good for certain scenarios where, you know, having something that's like really in your face with the details and stuff like that can actually maybe be a little bit distracting. You know, for example, while sleeping, or even while working. I mentioned I spent a lot of time. In fact, this has spent the most time in my ears versus any other IEM, and that's because a lot of the times I'm sleeping and working. And well, this is just frankly a really good IEM for those times. And maybe that sounds a little bit like cope, a little copium here, but again, I've got a lot of IEMs at my disposal. I wasn't even planning on reviewing this thing, but I kept reaching for it nonetheless. So yeah, that quality of this is honestly, it's kind of killer for me, honestly. Yeah. Low key also, I'd say the bass is really good here on the 41T. Again, it's not a lot of bass, but it's just got a nice, smooth, kind of a syrupy character to it. It digs really deep. It's got a satisfying rumble, and it's got just enough of that mid bass to sound full and give kick drums some physicality without ever being, you know, a risk to mid-range detail or anything like that. So that is really overall my general thoughts here on the 41T, but of course we got to put it into context. And I'll be honest, like this is, in some ways, it's an interesting comparison because those attributes that I described that I love about this are kind of unique in a sense. Not necessarily the tonal balance. The things that we're going to compare with it are in the realm of this tonal balance, but that laid back character that just makes this really easy to listen to in a lot of scenarios is a little bit unique here. But nonetheless, let's dive to the table and talk about how this compares with some other IEMs that And again, this might also seem a little bit of a weird comparison just in terms of like pricing, because it's a little bit all over the place, but these were nonetheless the things that were coming to my mind as I was thinking about what I needed to compare the 41T against. So let me rotary wrap this into shape, and let's go through the lineup. So here we've got the Juicy 41T. It's about 160 bucks, 4 balanced armatures, 1 dynamic driver. So that makes this a hybrid IEM. Interestingly enough, I'll just point out that it looks like it's about 130 bucks on AliExpress right now. Looks like they're doing a little bit of a sale. So anyway, over here we've got the Truth Ear Hexa. They're also doing a sale. You can get this a little bit cheaper, but normally it's 80 bucks. Also a hybrid. It's got 3 balanced armatures and 1 dynamic driver. Here we've got yet another hybrid. This is the Moondrop Blessing 3. This one's 320 bucks, so the most expensive one here on the table by far. It's got 4 balanced armatures and 2 dynamic drivers. And then finally up here we have got the Moondrop KATO, which is probably the closest analog in terms of like pricing, which is why this one's on the table at around 190 bucks. And this one's actually just a single dynamic driver, so not a hybrid. That's unique about this one on the table. So how do they compare in terms of sound signature? Well, the Juicy 41T, like I just got done describing, is kind of a low contrast neutral. It's a smidge of warmth in the low end that is enhanced by kind of a relaxed, slightly dark treble presentation, actually. The Hexa, I would describe as kind of similar in a lot of ways. This is kind of a low contrast neutral with a smidge of warmth in the mid-range, but the treble here is more present than it is on the 41T, and that stands out quite a bit. It makes this just a little bit more livelier, and we'll get into how that affects the technical performance in a bit. The Moondrop Blessing 3, I would describe is also a version of neutral, but this is kind of like a lean neutral. It's a little brighter in tone, maybe quite a bit brighter in tone, honestly, with a more prominent sub-bass boost, and just really good treble extension. It can come across a little bit clinical, and I mentioned it's got that sub-bass boost, but really it's also got kind of like a mid-bass dip to it, which contributes to that, more clinical, sterile, brighter sound versus the more laid-back, thicker, warmer sound here on the Juicy. And then finally over here to the Moondrop KATO. This is kind of a mild V-shaped sound signature. I would say it is the biggest difference versus if you're treating like the Blessing is kind of like a baseline. This one's just the least neutral. Okay, I'll just say that. I think it's also got kind of like the warmest low end versus all of these. It maybe would be the biggest difference. I think maybe the top end, these are all kind of comparable in a sense, but really it's like the low end where this is quite a bit meatier in the mid bass specifically. It's punchier mid bass, somewhat contrasty sound, which is why I describe that as kind of a mild V-shaped sound signature. In terms of technical performance, all right, the 41T, again, it's not very incisive. It is not high on detail, but I might also be kind of underrating it a little bit. I would say that the imaging on this is average. It's not bad. It's just average. Where this is maybe actually a little bit above average in terms of technical performance is in kind of like the sense of depth that I get. And I attribute that to, again, that kind of syrupy bass that just gives this an overall very smooth, relaxed listen. Yeah, it's very easy listen. The Hexa in comparison is actually, I would say, more incisive. This is also not like a technical beast or anything like that, but for 80 bucks, it's actually, I think, very, very competent. But it's got more definition on transients on the Hexa than you get here on the Juicy 41T. Imaging width is maybe not necessarily that much bigger versus this, and the bass quality, I would say, is a step behind, but it's frankly pretty competitive with the Juicy, and well, it's half the price. So just to kind of put this into context, the Blessing 3 in contrast, well, again, I mentioned this is the most expensive one on the table, and price does not always correlate with audio quality, but I think in terms of technical performance, there is definitely a commensurate, if not even more so, boost in the technical performance here. So it is a big step up in terms of mid-range resolution. I think the treble is just a lot more incisive here on the Blessing 3. You get stronger imaging because of that, stronger sense of separation between instruments. The bass response is, I would say, probably a little bit tighter, faster, more controlled when it's present. But because it's not always that present, it's got a little bit of that mid-bass suck out. This one can sound maybe a little bit more two-dimensional, like left to right, and less of that depth performance that you get here on the Juicy. And then finally, the KATO. Honestly, this is still really good, you know, for a single dynamic driver. Really, really solid. It's got nice snappy transients without ever being sharp in the treble, and the bass is really what's pretty standout in this. It's just got a nice physicality, good sense of heft, kind of thump and punch behind it. Whereas, you know, these are all much more relaxed in the bass, and so you'll lose out a bit of that because of that. But even beyond just there being more bass presence, the way that it does it, the representation of the bass, again, that kind of initial attack is just really strong here on the KATO. And then finally, let's talk about how they stack up in terms of form factor. So the 41T is, in my opinion, the best fitting of the bunch. It's super secure, super comfy, and it's a unique look that I dig, all right? We just got done talking about it. The cable's maybe a little bit on the thick side, but I don't know, overall, I kind of like it. The Hexa, in contrast, is, I would say, the smallest of the bunch. It's pretty handsome in kind of an understated way, right? It's got a metal black plate here on the outside, and the inside it has got this smoked resin, which you can kind of see through, and you can kind of see the drivers a little bit, but I don't know, mostly it's just kind of an understated look that I dig it. Fit is pretty good on this, on the Hexa, but because it is not semi-custom molded, fit security is not going to be as strong as you get here on the Juicy. The Moondrop Blessing 3, its biggest problem in form factor is that this outer panel is just a fingerprint magnet. Let me grab this microfiber towel that the Juicy came with. There you go. But apart from that, honestly, this is a really nice build quality on this thing. It is the biggest IEM here of the bunch, but fit security is, I would say, excellent. Mostly where that size is going to come into play is kind of down here in the concha, or actually the kind of the ear canal entrance region. So if you've got a small ear, be warned, the Blessing 3 might be a little bit of a problem for you. I've gotten pretty used to this fit though over the years, to the point that I really do like the way that the Blessing 3 fits, and also really like the way that it looks. But of course it is the highest price here on the table. And then finally we've got the Moondrop KATO, which I will also take a microfiber to. This is just kind of a basic dynamic driver shell. As you can kind of see the shape of it, there are no like semi-custom fittings or anything like that. And because of that, I would say that the fit security of the KATO is the weakest of the bunch. It's perfectly comfortable. I do think that the spring tips help with the fit security a little bit versus some of the other IEMs that Moondrop does in a similar shell, but nonetheless, it is a little bit on the heavy side, and you know, it doesn't latch onto the ear, so security is not great. What is kind of great, which at least what I like, is the aesthetic on this. I mean, the polished stainless steel, you can see it is getting a little bit of scratches over time, but I don't know, I dig it overall, and the cable is quite nice. But I think that's going to do it for my thoughts on these IEMs. Let me just double check my notes, and I think that'll be it. So let's wrap it up here for the Juicy 41T. Honestly, this is kind of a hard one for me to score because my initial impressions for this, again, a reminder, I was kind of unimpressed. The technical performance on this is not stand out really in any way, except for maybe that front to back depth because of the bass quality. And that's a thing that I honestly do value pretty highly, but I also value an IEM that's comfortable to wear and sounds like something I want to listen to when I don't need to listen to it. So I'm kind of on the fence with this one. I'm going to give it a very solid 4 out of 5. I mean, I'll be honest, I was going back and forth and like, could I give this thing a 5 stars? But we'll stick with a 4 out of 5 for now. And yeah, honestly, I think this is, if you gave me $200 to buy any IEM, this would be what I buy for myself. And I expect that over the next few months, this will still be one of the IEMs that spends the most time in my ears because of the sound qualities and the fit. And if you're interested in checking out for yourself, like I mentioned, I've got links in the description down below. And while you're down there fishing around for that link, please be sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, ding the YouTube bell, and join me on Discord, which I've also got linked down below. And I'll catch you on the next super review, unless you're here live, in which case hang out after this little sponsored message and we will have a chat.